All right, so get ready because today we are doing a deep dive into the world of comedy.
Oh, yeah.
But not just any comedy. We're talking about the raw and unfiltered perspective of Katt Williams.
Wow.
And to help us unpack all of this, we have our expert here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, this interview that we're going to be going over, it's a wild ride, filled with Katt's take on the industry, its secrets, and some pretty bold claims about some really big names.
Yeah, it's definitely captivating. Katt, he really doesn't hold back. And what makes this even more interesting is that he's framing this whole conversation as a reckoning. Like, it's time for some truth-telling about how the comedy business really works.
Yeah, he's not just talking generally either. He names names: Steve Harvey, Cedric the Entertainer, Rickey Smiley.
Sure.
He's alleging a lack of authenticity, that some comedians prioritize fame and money over actual talent and hard work.
Exactly. And he gets into specifics, too. For instance, with Steve Harvey, Katt brings up the accusation that Harvey has used material from another comedian, Mark Curry.
Oh.
Mark Curry, by the way, was one of the original hosts of BT's Comic View, which is a huge platform for black comedians back in the 90s.
So right off the bat, Katt is bringing in this idea of who gets credit, who is original, and who might be taking shortcuts to success.
Right. Then there's the accusation against Cedric the Entertainer about a joke, specifically one involving a car that Katt claims Cedric later used. Now, it's important to note that we don't have proof for these claims. It's just Katt's perspective. But what's fascinating is how he's connecting these specific examples to a larger point about integrity in the comedy world.
And then things get really interesting with Rickey Smiley. Katt claims that Smiley talked about almost playing Money Mike in Friday After Next, which of course became one of Katt's most iconic roles.
And this is where it gets layered. Katt explains that he specifically rewrote the Money Mike character because he refused to do a scene where Money Mike is raped in a bathroom. He felt it was totally inappropriate for a comedy, and he was adamant that rape should never be played for laughs.
So it's not just about the role itself. It's about Katt's principles, his line in the sand.
Exactly. It shows you how seriously he takes the responsibility of representing these characters, and also this underlying tension between what might be considered funny versus what crosses a line ethically.
He goes really deep into his creative process for Friday After Next, talking about collaborating with the wardrobe department, making sure everything was authentic. He even mentions casting Archbishop Don Magic Juan, who is a well-known figure in the pimp community, to add even more realism to the character.
It's like he's saying, I'm not just showing up, I'm crafting this, I'm putting thought into every detail. And you can see how that meticulousness might clash with the idea of someone taking shortcuts or chasing a paycheck.
Right. And then, of course, we get to the Kevin Hart of it all. Katt expresses some skepticism about Hart's super fast rise to fame, especially in the LA comedy scene.
He's basically saying that he doesn't really see the evidence for Hart's rapid success. He doesn't recall Hart having a massive stand-up following in LA before breaking into Hollywood. This is interesting, though, because in Kevin Hart's documentary with Chris Rock, he actually talks about focusing on the East Coast comedy scene early in his career. So there's a potential discrepancy there depending on which narrative you're following.
Which is what makes this whole deep dive so fascinating, right? We're getting these different perspectives, these conflicting accounts. And it's up to us to consider all sides.
Exactly. It highlights how complex truth can be, especially in a field like comedy where so much is subjective.
Now, Katt also has some thoughts about how the internet has impacted stand-up comedy.
He argues that while the internet has made comedy way more accessible, it's also created this situation where comedians have less time to hone their material, to try out jokes and refine them on stage before they're instantly shared online.
Yeah, and that makes you think, okay, what's the balance as a listener? Do you want to go viral overnight, or do you want time to really perfect your craft?
Right, because the internet,
Yeah.
while offering huge exposure, can also lead to this kind of pressure cooker environment for new comedians.
And Katt doesn't shy away from addressing how cutthroat the comedy world can be.
No, he doesn't. He compares it to like professional sports, this intense drive to win, to be the best. He believes comedians should be judged solely on their performance, and if they're not good, well, they should naturally fade away. It's almost like he's advocating for a survival of the fittest mentality in the industry.
Interesting. And he brings up the famous story of Dave Chappelle walking away from that $50 million contract with Comedy Central.
Oh, yeah. Katt actually claims the amount was much higher than that. But the point that he's making is about artistic integrity, that sometimes you got to stand up for what you believe in, even if it means turning down a huge payday.
Which is a bold statement, especially coming from someone who's been in the trenches of the comedy world for so long. Now let's switch gears for a second and talk about Katt Williams himself. His personal journey is anything but ordinary.
It really is.
He talks about being raised as a Jehovah's Witness, learning to read at an incredibly young age, like 3 years old, and speaking in front of audiences early on. You can see how those experiences, even though they might seem unconnected to comedy, actually lead the groundwork for his later career.
Oh, absolutely. There are so many through lines there.
Yeah. And he doesn't just stop there. He talks about joining the Nation of Islam in Oakland and how all of these religious explorations shaped his worldview.
Yeah, it shows a willingness to question,
Yeah.
to seek, and that definitely comes across in his comedy.
Then there's this story about him being homeless before filming Friday After Next. He talks about breaking his front teeth and needing surgery, which just highlights the struggles he faced even as he was on the verge of a major breakthrough.
It humanizes him, right? It reminds you that success isn't always a straight line. And even someone like Katt Williams, who we see on stage as this larger-than-life personality, has been through some incredibly tough times.
For sure. He also mentions some legal troubles, without going into detail. But it makes you realize there's a whole other layer to his story, a complexity that probably informs his views on the world.
Definitely adds a layer of depth to his perspective.
But here's the thing. Even with all of those challenges, he's incredibly generous. He mentions sponsoring Melora Hardin's star on the Walk of Fame. Melora Hardin played Jan on The Office, and he's helped out other comedians who are struggling financially.
It shows that there's this compassionate side to him, this willingness to give back, even while calling out what he sees as these negative aspects of the industry.
He also talks about preferring the company of women, both personally and professionally, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, it definitely challenges traditional notions of masculinity.
Yeah.
And makes you think about the influence of women in his life.
And just to round things out, he mentions his current tour, Dark Matters, and his upcoming Netflix special. He even briefly touches on his thoughts about American politics, expressing disillusionment with both major parties.
It shows that he's engaged with the world, he's paying attention, and he's not afraid to express his opinions even if they're controversial.
This has been quite a ride so far. So much to unpack. We're going to take a quick break to process all of this, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with part 2 of our Katt Williams deep dive.
Sounds good. So, as we continue to explore Katt's perspective, one thing that really stands out is his incredible work ethic.
Yeah, it's not just about being funny, right? It's about taking comedy seriously as a craft.
He mentions watching other comedians' sets over and over again, analyzing their jokes, even quantifying how many laughs they get per minute to kind of measure his own progress. It's like he's approaching comedy almost scientifically.
Wow. He's not just winging it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And that dedication extends to his acting as well.
Absolutely. He talks about this method that he uses, where he completely erases his own personality to fully embody a character. He does his research, figures out their motivations, even like their mannerisms. And he says that he does this for every single role, whether it's a big dramatic part or just a smaller one.
It's like he's saying, I respect the work, I respect the audience, and I'm not going to phone it in.
Right. And you can see how that dedication might fuel his frustration with those he perceives as being less committed, the ones he sees as taking shortcuts. It's like he's saying, if I'm putting in all this work, you should too.
Which brings us back to his criticisms of certain big names in the industry. He's questioning their success, suggesting that maybe they haven't earned it through pure talent and effort.
It's a bold move, challenging people at that level. But it speaks to his willingness to speak his truth, even if it ruffles some feathers.
Yeah, he's definitely not afraid of a little controversy. And that fearlessness comes through when he talks about his own struggles, like that period of homelessness before he landed Friday After Next. He's very open about the financial hardships he faced, even needing surgery for his teeth.
It's a reminder that even those who reach the top have often faced incredible adversity. It makes you realize that Katt's success didn't happen overnight.
It also adds another dimension to his critique of the industry, right? It's like he's saying, I know what it's like to struggle, and I know what it takes to make it, so don't come here with half-baked efforts.
Exactly. And he doesn't shy away from his legal troubles either. Although he doesn't get into specifics, it's like a little glimpse into another layer of his life, one that's probably shaped his views on power in the system.
But what's interesting is that despite all these challenges, he comes across as genuinely generous. He talks about adopting 7 children, sponsoring other artists, and giving back to the communities that he visits on tour.
It's almost like a counterpoint to his harsher criticisms. He's not just about calling people out, he's also about lifting others up.
Yeah, he's definitely a complex character, and he gets even more fascinating when he talks about his preference for the company of women, both in his personal life and professionally.
It's a pretty unconventional perspective. especially for someone in his position. It makes you wonder about the strong women who have influenced him throughout his life.
And it's refreshing to hear someone in the entertainment industry talk openly about these kinds of preferences. He's not afraid to break the mold.
Which is very much in line with his overall message of authenticity. He's being himself, and he's challenging others to do the same.
Even when it comes to politics, he doesn't hold back. He talks about being disillusioned with both major parties and expresses concern for the future of the country.
It shows that he's not just living in this bubble of the entertainment world. He's engaged with the bigger picture, the social and political landscape, and he's not afraid to share his opinions.
This deep dive is really giving us a multifaceted view of Katt Williams. He's a comedian, a social critic, a father, a philanthropist, and so much more.
Yeah, it's like peeling back the layers of an onion. And what we're finding is not just this simple, straightforward personality, but a complex, contradictory, and ultimately very human individual.
And with that, I think we need to take a moment to process everything we've learned so far. There's still more to uncover. So stay tuned for part 3 of our deep dive into the mind of Katt Williams. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Katt Williams and Fugality. There's one more piece of the puzzle we need to explore here, and that's his perspective on the business of comedy itself. He gets really candid about the competition, the power dynamics, the whole behind-the-scenes game.
Yeah, it's like he's pulling back the curtain.
Yeah.
Showing us all the machinery that drives the industry, the stuff most people never see. He talks about the importance of being independent, owning your own work, not letting yourself get controlled by the big players.
He actually financed his first stand-up special himself, even though it almost wiped out his savings.
Wow.
That's a huge risk.
Yeah, it shows you how much he believed in himself, in his vision, his material. He wasn't going to wait around for someone to give him permission. And that entrepreneurial spirit, it really goes hand in hand with his criticism of those who he sees as prioritizing fame over substance.
He's not impressed by those who take the easy route or chase trends.
No, not at all.
He's basically calling them out for being sellouts, right? Compromising their art for a quick buck.
Exactly. And he doesn't hold back even when it comes to some of the biggest names.
Right.
He questions their narratives, suggests that maybe they haven't really earned their success through pure talent and hard work.
Yeah, it's pretty controversial. Calling out people at that level, it takes guts.
It does. But it also raises some important questions about how we define success in the entertainment industry. Is it about numbers, awards, social media followers? Or is it about something deeper, something more authentic?
And Katt seems to be arguing for the latter. He's saying, look, I've seen the dark side of this industry. I know how the game is played, and I'm not going to play by those rules. It's interesting.
He's also critical of what he calls the gatekeepers of the industry, the ones who control access to opportunities and platforms. He suggests that they often favor those who conform, those who fit a certain mold, which can shut out truly talented individuals who don't play the game. It makes you think about who gets to decide what's funny, who gets a platform, who gets to succeed. Is it always a level playing field?
Katt definitely seems to think there's an uneven playing field, particularly when it comes to Black artists. He feels that they often face greater challenges and receive less support than their white counterparts. That's a really good point. It's a critique that aligns with a lot of the conversations happening right now about diversity, representation, and equity in Hollywood.
Exactly. And it's another example of Katt's willingness to speak out against injustice, even when it's within his own industry. He's not just a comedian, he's a social commentator, someone who's using his platform to shine a light on the issues that matter to him.
It's inspiring in a way. He's not afraid to risk his own career to speak his truth. So to wrap up this deep dive, what are the big takeaways, the things we should be pondering as we walk away from this conversation with Katt Williams?
Well, I think it's clear that truth is often subjective, and that there are always multiple perspectives to consider. Katt's perspective is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. But what he does so effectively is make us question, challenge our assumptions, and look beyond the surface. He reminds us that the entertainment industry, like any industry, is full of complexities, power dynamics, and behind-the-scenes maneuvers.
Yeah, and in the end, maybe that's the most valuable lesson he's offering, to be critical thinkers.
Yeah.
To question what we see and hear, and to form our own conclusions based on, careful consideration.
Right, and to never be afraid to speak our own truths, even when they're uncomfortable or unpopular. That's the legacy of Katt Williams, the comedian who dared to challenge the status quo
Yeah.
and make us think a little differently about the world around us.
I think that's a great place to leave it. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Katt Williams. We hope it's left you with as much to ponder as it has us. Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning everything